This is Paradise Bay, a city that was supposed to be the crown jewel of Magnolia County, but I became so discouraged by it that I abandoned it 277 days ago. That's right, it's been 277 days or 9 months since we've done a proper new build here. Not since we added the hospital and the neighborhood around it. And since then, most of our time here has been spent on mulligans, with the only exception being the new amusement park. And because of how discouraged I've been, our attention has shifted entirely to Bend and Bailey. And the reasons for that are pretty simple. I don't like this silly roadway V, I don't like how I've placed these trees, I don't like the city's suburban design, and I really don't like this silly rhyme, so I'll stop. Sorry about that. The whole city feels like a series of disconnected projects, and it reminds me of something that a professor once told me in planning school. Never plan in a vacuum. You should always be thinking about the big picture, and I just didn't do that here. And I'll be honest, it's completely sapped my enthusiasm for the city, and that kind of kills me, because I always meant for Paradise Bay to be the starting point in the biggest city in Magnolia County. In fact, the only reason that our first build wasn't here is because I didn't know how to change the starting tile when I created the map. So today, in the 50th episode of Magnolia County, we're going to right those wrongs, because we've got big things planned for Paradise Bay in the future, and we can't do that if the past is giving us anxiety. So let's take out the sledgehammer and build the Paradise Bay we've always envisioned. We're going to revamp the entire roadway network, still considering hierarchy, but staying true to a more urban form. And we'll revamp our land uses, replacing these vanilla buildings with region pack assets. We'll remove all these controversial surfaces that we added to the build and replace them with something a bit more fitting. And we'll improve the look of the beach because honestly, this is pretty ugly. And by the end, we'll leave Paradise Bay in a place where it's ready to grow up, not just sprawl out. But that's not the only thing that we're doing today. This episode is a major milestone, and we're celebrating with some custom assets put together by the incredible Tigon. I'll showcase those at the end, so be sure to stick around. I'll also have a special build montage showing how far we've come since the beginning of the series, so be sure to stick around for that as well. And if you're excited to take a sledgehammer to Paradise Bay, hit the like button. If you're more excited that we're about to start increasing density, hit the like button for that too, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Or leave an emoji representing mulligans for the sake of engagement. But before we jump in, I'm about to head out the door to meet up with some friends in the Wisconsin Dells to hit up some water parks. And that means it's the perfect time to bust out my BOMBAS. Wait, you don't think I'm wearing socks to the water park, do you? BOMBAS makes awesome sandals, and I'm wearing them anytime that I'm not in the water. They're super comfortable, lightweight and grippy, perfect for a day of fun at the water park. They also dry super quickly, which is great because once I'm back at the condo, I'm going to be pairing them with my BOMBAS socks. They go together perfectly, and they keep my feet cozy even as the temperature starts to cool off. And I've got to sing the praises of the socks themselves. They're super soft, the fit is perfect, and they last forever. But I don't just love BOMBAS because everything they make is high quality, I love them because of their mission. For every item you purchase, they donate an essential item of clothing to someone in need. One purchased equals one donated. To date, they donated over 150 million items, which I think is incredible. Plus, everything is backed by their 100% happiness guarantee. If you're not completely satisfied with your purchase, they'll handle free returns or exchanges, no questions asked. So feel good and do good with BOMBAS. New customers get 20% off their first purchase. Just go to bombas.com/cityplanner and use code cityplanner at checkout. And BOMBAS now offers international shipping, so you can get this comfy goodness no matter where you live. Thanks again to BOMBAS for sponsoring another video. Now let's get back to it. We're going to be making some significant modifications to the build today, so I thought it'd make the most sense to begin by baselining things. So here are the 9 neighborhoods that we're going to be modifying today, and here are their current population and employment counts. There's a total of 16,579 people that live in these neighborhoods and 7,678 that work in them. And my goal is that these neighborhoods will be more or less within the ballpark of these numbers when we're done. However, if things are a bit different, I'm not going to sweat it. We're going to be increasing the density in this city quite a bit over the next few episodes, so I'm okay with things being a little bit different. Still, keep an eye on these numbers because we'll be checking on them at the end of the episode. And now that we baseline things, let's move on to modifying our roadway network. I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that this is the biggest project that we've ever taken on in Cities Skylines 1 or 2. And that's because we're about to completely rethink the roadway network for the entire city. There are a couple of reasons for that. First, I think that we've gone a little bit hard on roadway hierarchy. What I mean by that is, though we have a very strong and very predictable roadway hierarchy, it's very suburban. So this road right here, for instance, Lake Street, is an arterial. And generally you want to limit access on an arterial, but I've also limited the land uses, I've limited access, I've limited any reason to be on this road unless you're a vehicle. And what that's done is create a very suburban style expressway going through the heart of the city, acting as a major barrier. In an urban context, you might expect to see land uses on here, fronting this road, lots of pedestrian activity, maybe some parked cars, and for this transit to serve all the uses on this road. But that's not the way that we're using it in the city. And I've done this exact same thing in other parts of the community as well. So we're going to go back to the drawing board and desuburbanize our roadway hierarchy. Second, I think that the orientation of the roads is very confused. So in some instances, it makes a lot of sense. Right here in downtown, these roads are oriented towards the shore. You can see that they're parallel with the shore. That makes sense. Same thing right here. However, we reorient quickly towards the Jeffersonian grid. That's not a problem. My bigger problem, though, is that we do it very abruptly and very quickly, and we end up with this weird V-shaped road. I don't think that's realistic. So what I want to do is extend this orientation a bit further back into this neighborhood and then have a more gradual transition. But that's not the most extreme change that we're going to make. Those are going to occur in Sugar Grove right here, Voyager Portage, and Little Nantucket, where we completely changed the roadway orientation seemingly arbitrarily. And that just wouldn't happen, at least not in a historic city center. So what I want to do is reorient these neighborhoods towards the Jeffersonian grid. And that means that we're going to basically eliminate all the land uses in these areas. And I know that that sounds extreme, but look at these neighborhoods. They look terrible. They have all vanilla assets. They've all leveled to level 5. And as a result, every building looks the same. So even if we weren't going to be doing this, I'd want to rethink this area. And honestly, it gives us an opportunity to rethink the rail line, the way that we're interacting with the land uses around it. Just in general, make this area a ton better. And the same thing extends over here to Voyager Portage. This just doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, the one neighborhood that I think there's going to be some controversy that I'm redeveloping is going to be Sugar Grove or Johnson's Grove. And that's because this neighborhood has more diversity in terms of the land uses. The thing is, over the number of updates that we've had with the game, a number of things in this neighborhood have broken. And because of that, I think that we should rethink this area. I also think it looks very suburban in terms of its character, and I don't really want that for an area this close to downtown. So we're going to blow the whole thing up, but I will try to preserve a couple of roads that give this neighborhood its signature shape. And there's no great place to begin this, so I think that we're going to start in the downtown area and redo Superior Street. Now, one of the things that we're going to have to do fairly universally as we're building these areas is dezone everything, then remove all the trees, then delete all the buildings. And that's because we have plopped the growables on. And if I don't do that, all the buildings will remain even after I delete the roads. So if you see me doing a whole bunch of that, that's the reason why. Now we're at a point where we can start to upgrade Superior Street. And for that, I just want to go with the 4-lane divided road that we've been using everywhere else. And I'm just going to upgrade the southern portion of this couplet, or I guess northern portion is what this would actually be. And now we're ready to start to create our new roadway network right here. Now, what I think I want to do is have this road right here orient with the Jeffersonian grid, but have this road orient with Superior. And now for the transition, I'll just take all these roads that intersect and connect them. And that leaves us with some awkwardness in this area, but I've got a plan. I'm going to eliminate these uses right here and then convert this alleyway to be a road. And I ended up just redrawing this road in because I wanted to make sure that it lines up nicely with this road that crosses over the railroad tracks, but I think that that's really nice. Now I want to extend the grid across this way, which means that we're going to modify this park a bit. And by a bit, I mean the park's going to go. And unfortunately, that means that we had to go back to the drawing board on many of these homes as well. Now I want to clean out this transition on Lincoln Street. And I think this is going to be an easy one. It's basically a perfect connection. Now, these block lengths are just a little bit too big. So I'm going to clean this up. We'll extend this road straight through. And then I extended this road through and got rid of a lot of this park. And honestly, at this point, we're going to have to basically redo the park. And then lastly, I think I want to add one roundabout to kind of clean up some of these ugly junctions. And I think that that is really, really good. This is a collector through this area anyway, so having this here for traffic calming wouldn't be a bad thing. So now that we've got this area cleaned up, I'm gonna move on to Lake Street. And this is gonna have some significant changes. So basically, I want to orient all the uses towards Lake Street. So I gotta remove all these fences and then all the land uses along Lake Street. Now, what I think I'm inclined to do along Foggy Street is just convert this to be parking. So I'll go with some of our one-way perpendicular parking alleys, and I want to do this very purposefully. But I see one issue. The zoning is super broken up. So rather than just upgrading this, I think I'm going to delete the road and redraw it in myself to make sure that our zoning is 100% perfect. And to do that, I'm just going to make sure that I don't have snap to guidelines on. And then I want this to be about 4 units back. And I want to make sure that I don't have any zoning on this parking lot road either. And then one thing that I should have done that I did not do was take all of these segments and make them the exact same height as Lake Street. That's going to be pivotal if we want to make all of our zoning look nice here. So I'm going to Control H these into place and have some crazy things happen. Now this might look terrible, but we're very close to this being complete. Basically, I need to go through here and just make sure that everything is smooth. So I'm going to grab the height from Lake Street and pull it on down. And then I want to make a number of connections directly into Lake Street. So I'm going to grab just local roads and extend them through as connections. I'm going to leave all the alleys to not be connected into Lake Street. And it might seem like I just unceremoniously severed Main Street right here, and honestly, it's because I did. I don't know why that connection was made through here, and I think it just makes much more sense to continue the grid and have this major arterial terminate at another major arterial. But before I forget, I do want to convert this segment of road as this nice urban arterial right here. And then I've got one more change for this side of the road that I think that you're all gonna like. I'm going to reduce the parking by adding a retaining wall. So basically with this alleyway, if you add a retaining wall on one side, you lose half the parking. It just looks a lot cleaner in my opinion. It ends up making this look like a much more rational amount of parking for what will be basically a Main Street corridor. And I think that this right-hand side of the road is looking pretty awesome and very urban at this point. But the left-hand side is very suburban. And the first thing that we have to do to fix that is basically rethink all of Sugar Grove. So I'm going to remove basically all of the roads except for Foggy Street right here. I'm going to extend that up as a diagonal road all the way through here. And I'm going to also keep the left-hand side of Barlow Street, which is actually Bluffside Street. And there we go, we have a mostly clean slate here, with the exception of one thing. Our terrain is really been terraformed here, and we're gonna have to continue to do that. So I clearly wanna make Lake Street look very similar to the other side of it. So I'm gonna extend the height of Lake Street out a bit further. And then we'll do the exact same thing with the parking lot alleys that we did over on the other side of the road. I've got most of the local roadway network right here fleshed out, but I need to figure out what's going on with Primrose Street. And I think that we're going to turn this into Bluffside Street, or we'll rename that to be Bluffside Street once again. This will be the major collector linking all these neighborhoods together. I'm also going to take and add another road right here. Maybe this will be Primrose Street. And I think that we've got to take Fawn Street and bring this down a little bit to line this up nicely right here with this street. ultimately, I've just greatly simplified this area. It's a much stronger grid, feels much more like the rest of downtown. So now let's move on to Voyager's Portage. And for this one, all the local roads have to go, and Bluffside has to be formalized as that collector. You know, and I thought that this road was going to work, but it's way too close to Bluffside. So I'm going to back that over just a bit. And then we haven't urbanized this area yet, but I think I'm going to do it right now anyway. It seems like a reasonable place for the urbanized area to end. And then I wrap things up over here near the park, trying to mirror the terrain right here while extending the grid all the way up to the park. So it really makes this curved road feel a lot more special in my opinion. And then the last thing that we have to do here is add a retaining wall to shrink up our parking. Perfect. And then the final area that we're going to focus on is the Glenmore Little Nantucket area. And that's because I want to completely rethink Little Nantucket and the rail line right here, which is going to impact Glenmore. So the first thing that I'm going to do is eliminate all the local roads in Little Nantucket. And now that most of this is gone, I also want to eliminate the rail line and Pleasanton Street and probably Laurel Street right here as well. And that leaves this entire area feeling pretty unfinished, but I've got some ideas on how we can finish it. I want to basically have a nice straight road that goes right along where the railroad track will be. Now, I think ideally that'd be right here, but that is going to be way too close to the railroad track and the bridge. So I'm going to bump this over just a little bit. And now that we have this road here, I'm going to add the new train track. And obviously we're going to use one of Tigon's double train track non-electrified here. And I made this perfectly parallel with this road. Now, this gives us the opportunity to have much more logical connections through this area. And now we can just extend this grid from Glenmore over to Little Nantucket and have this feel nice and organized. But first, I want to select where our collector that's going to link these two neighborhoods will be. And I think I want to do that right about here, where it's nice and straight and the grade is pretty gentle. That also means I will get rid of this gigantic roundabout. And if we have one, it'll be right here at Cornflower Street. I'll probably have one more junction right here so that we're not cul-de-sac in this area any more than we have to. And this, to me, feels like a much more logical layout for this area. But there's one more improvement that I have to make, and that's right here, because now we've got a bunch of strange things happening. So we'll do something like that, which preserves that orientation of that building near the Mulligan Bridge. Speaking of this bridge, though, look at what's happened here. Things have shifted, so we can fix that. We've got an opportunity. We'll call a mulligan on the Mulligan Bridge. And honestly, sometimes it just makes more sense to redraw the whole road, which is why I've done that right here. Now, this was Main Street, and at one point I was going to make this a nice 90, but because of the tram line here, I think I'm going to leave it just as is. But we will rename this, because every community has to have a Main Street. And then the last roadway change I want to make is going to be right here at Dean Street. I don't love the way that this hooks down, and though it's painful to lose this custom station, I think it's going to be worth it to straighten this out. And in my opinion, this is a ton better. And I could see eminent domain being used on this farm to ensure that this junction of two major arterials is as smooth and clean as possible. And with that, most of our roadway changes are complete. Now, I did make a couple of off-camera adjustments. I just kind of wanted to simplify things here in Sugar Grove, and I think that it looks a ton better. And I also cleaned up what is now Myrtle Street right here, and hopefully we've appeased Myrtle by simplifying this and making this connection a little bit nicer. Now, obviously, there's more that we have to do here. I want to remove some of the traffic signals, remove a bit of parking, add street trees, and swap out those alleys, but still, this is most of the bones of the roadway network, and I think that things look outstanding. So I figure it'd be good to wrap up with a quick before and after of the roadway network because we've made some substantial changes. And honestly, I think that this makes everything look so much better. Everything looks so much more historic, so much more logical. You'll be able to tell where the downtown is versus the suburban areas. And this new layout's just going to give the city a better sense of history, which is something that I really appreciate. I also think that it's going to make increasing the density in the entire city much easier because rather than dealing with all of those curves that we had before arbitrarily, we have a much tighter grid, which makes it easier for natural redevelopment using the zoning tools rather than plopping all the buildings by hand. And finally, we've just made the city a ton easier to navigate, which is going to make transit easier to navigate as well. And obviously, that's another improvement that we need to make a little bit later on in the video. But for now, with our roadway network complete, let's move on to zoning. I've been going back and forth about the best way to approach zoning today, and initially I was thinking I would develop this whole land use plan with idealized land uses for the entire city. Now we're going to do that eventually, probably area by area, but I don't want to do that all at once. So what we're going to do today is basically replace things in kind with a couple of exceptions. So what I mean by that is if we had single family homes before this build, we're going to have single family homes once again. I want the community to be recognizable. But there will be a couple of exceptions. Right here along the rail corridor, my vision was always to have low rent housing, but when we had that build, all we had were really tall low rent buildings. So as a result, I didn't place them. But now we have shorter French low rent buildings, shorter Eastern European buildings, and even some of the Chinese buildings would probably fit this area very nicely. So we're not going to be afraid to add in a couple of those. I'm also not going to be afraid to swap out some of our city service buildings because these are really a product of their time and they don't necessarily fit the build all that well. So things like this small high school, that's gone. The police station, the fire department, the clinic even, all of those are going to be replaced with assets that I think fit the aesthetic of a North American build a bit better. And then one more big change that I think is going to be fairly controversial. I was initially thinking that I would try to preserve the alleyways. I know the vision that I initially had for them. I wanted it to feel like there were a bunch of alleys in this older part of town where garages were on the alleys and people could load from there. But that's not the way that the assets that we have in the game work, or at least not the assets that we have right now. So I'm going to remove most of these alleys and rezone these areas and try to make sure that everything is nice and clean and tidy. Now, the bonus of doing this is that we'll get rid of some of these level 5 assets. Obviously, these are super jank right now. Don't worry about that. But a lot of these assets are repeating and you'll see the exact same home with the exact same propping. And that's all because everything is level 5. Now that happened because we added the Bye Bye Homeless mod a long time ago. But now that we don't have to have that mod anymore, we should have more asset variety if we rezone this area. So we're gonna use the alleyways as the impetus for doing that. And finally, and in a similar vein, we're going to also replace these buildings right here with some level 1 and 3 assets. These all leveled up to level 5. They're beautiful buildings, but they're really out of scale for the city right now. Maybe in the future we'll uncap the density, but for now, I don't think that these buildings would exist in this community, at least at this scale. So with our plan in place, let's begin by redoing our city services. And I'm just going to eliminate all of these buildings right here. And that was our police station, our clinic, and our fire station. So we've got to replace all of those. I'm going to keep the post office, but I will get rid of this high school and the ugly parking behind it. And now I'm going to replace them, starting out with our elementary school. And I know I didn't just delete one of these, but we deleted one while we were redoing this area. And I think that we're going to go with something that is a bit bigger, something that has a bit more density. So I decided to add this a couple units back from Main Street just for the sake of noise. We can add in some trees or something like that to add some buffering and use the school as the impetus to divide these blocks into something a bit more manageable, which I think is really going to benefit us down the line. Now for the rest of our city services, I think I want to remove a lot of these European looking commercial buildings. And we will eventually replace all those uses, but it feels good to have a clean slate. Now for our police station, I think I'm gonna go with the US Southwestern Police Station. Just feels like it would fit the vibe of this community well. And it's gonna fit the block really nicely too. And one quick thing I wanna do, you might see that it's getting all blobby right here. There's a quick fix for this. If you happen to know what pavement is right here and you have the area bucket, you can just replace the pavement just like this, and now the blobbing stops. The only problem is that wasn't the same kind of pavement. But it wasn't hard to find it. I think for our fire station, we'll stick with the Southwest and place one of those right across the street. And then for the clinic, I'm gonna buck our trend a little bit and go with the small medical clinic. The main reason for this is we don't really have a need for a larger clinic. We have a hospital that's not all that far away from this area. And then while I'm thinking of healthcare, I want to also think about death care because the only thing serving this community is our cemetery. And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, it's basically full. So we're going to add in a crematorium, although that doesn't necessarily need to be in the downtown area. So I am going to sneak this a little ways away. Maybe we'll put it over here in Voyager Portage. And I'm going to upgrade this right away. And bluntly, one of the reasons I'm okay sticking it in a residential neighborhood is that generally these sorts of uses, along with churches and sometimes daycares, are allowed in basically any kind of neighborhood. So this is going to be a completely fine place for this use. Next up, we're going to replace the high school that we demolished downtown. And I'm going to place one of the Northeastern USA high schools. And we'll place that right in the same location. And I just want to center this on School Street. That feels very fitting. And that's lovely. The only thing I want to do right away is add in this upgrade for the extension wing. I think that we're going to need this. And then I also want to find some sort of a recreation amenity. And I don't necessarily know that it needs to go right here, but it could. I'm thinking actually that we'll probably get rid of some of the homes back here. And I'll end up placing a football field right here. And we'll obviously have to modify our roadway network to make this work. And then I just modify the grid around these assets, and I just think that that looks really, really good. The one change I want to make is going to be right here. I want this to naturally curve into the street up here. So we'll use our complex curve tool and do something like that, which I think looks really great. And then there's at least one more school that we have to place. I eliminated an elementary school over here, and I think I'm going to replace it with an Eastern European elementary school. This has a bit more massing, but it's not very tall, which is something that I think will look nice in this area. And it's a very tight fit. I think that we might have to get rid of some of the landscaping to make it work, but it's completely fine. And honestly, it feels like a pretty good fit now. The one thing I want to see is if there's an upgrade. There is not. It is what it is, 1,500 students, which is perfect. So that leaves us with one major city service that we didn't replace, and that's all the parks. But I think that we're going to do that as we're zoning things in. So let's move on to that. And before we do anything there, we need to go into our options, because if we don't make a couple of settings adjustments in the advanced road tools, it can feel like the tool doesn't work. Basically, if you have prevent zoning cells from being removed and prevent occupied cells from being removed, both of those selected, the tool doesn't work most of the time in older areas. That's because if you have even one tile on a road, even if it's 4 units back that has zoning in it, you won't be able to remove the zoning if you have this option selected. So we're going to deselect that. Got to be really careful with the tool, but it will be much more responsive to us. The second one is prevent occupied cells from being removed. This is really problematic if you have like a park or another building on a large road that doesn't have a node. If that's on there, you won't be able to remove the zoning. So this option is generally one that trips people up as well. So I will deselect both of those for the time being. But again, that means I've got to be extra careful with the tool. It also means that I'm only going to use it from the road services menu. If you use the zone controller, I find that it's a bit more predictable. But now I should be able to go onto streets like this and easily remove the zoning. And you can see it's no problem. I can also control where the zoning is going to be occurring because I want this to be fronting Lake Street. Super simple. So why don't we begin right here on Lake Street? And for a mixed use area like this, we're going to be mixing in a variety of the USA assets. So the medium density assets, the row home assets, We're also going to throw in some UK assets, not as many of these medium density housing units, but certainly we're going to add in a whole bunch of UK mixed housing, which I think looks really nice on Main Street corridors, as well as the northeastern and southwestern mixed use. Obviously, those work really well in a build like this as well, but they can get repetitive if you're not really careful with them. We'll also add in a bunch of the northeastern commercial, but we're going to be really judicious with our use of the southwestern low-density businesses because those look more suburban in character. I may also throw in some of the Eastern European low-density businesses because I feel like those can feel like really unique businesses in a commercial corridor. And then finally, we'll throw in a couple of offices here and there as well, trying to make sure that we're controlling parking so we don't end up with a sea of parking on what's supposed to be a walkable corridor. And as far as a blueprint goes for mixed use zoning, I think that this looks pretty darn good, but there are a couple of things that we're going to want to change. I think that it's always fine to zone things in to begin with, but if you have an important road like this, you're probably going to want to do a little bit of cleanup after the fact. Things like this just don't look great where we have a corner building in the wrong spot. All you got to do to clean this up, or all that I'm going to do anyway, is pause it, use Move It to pull this to the other side, and then grab all these buildings and pull them over. And then if we want to get really fancy, we'll give this a little bit of space. And we'll add in a pocket park like this, which to me makes this feel like a much more finished area. So I'm going to be going through each and every block and doing things like this just to make sure that things are as clean as possible. And when I really like a building, I'm going to lock it in place as well, especially because some of these are a little bit taller than I was hoping for. So I might also go back to the drawing board, grab buildings that are nearby and move them over just so that we have a nice cohesive density throughout the entire corridor. And of course, again, I'm going to be adding lots and lots of pocket parks all over the place. There we go. This feels much better. It's not 100% perfect, but it is pretty darn good. I've gone through and I've locked most of these buildings and just tried to make sure that the transitions make sense. I also added a couple gas stations at key arterial intersections, considering that's where you might expect to see something like this. I think that the whole corridor just feels really cohesive and really good. Now, while we're over here, we've got a couple of blocks of what I believe is Dean Street that needs a little bit of work. So I'm going to improve this block, but I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I'm just going to basically clone what I did over here before. The only difference is that I will use some of our newer land uses. And look at this, we've unlocked the Westwood Center, so maybe we'll plop this one right over here. And I think that looks pretty outstanding. It's the kind of corridor you might expect to see in a mid-sized city, which is great. So now I want to move on to some of the areas behind that corridor and get in some single family homes. Now for these, I just want to be very organized. I want all of the homes facing in the same direction. I want things to make sense and not feel random. So we will be controlling the zoning quite extensively through here. And I think unless the homes are facing the water over here, I'm going to have them face from left to right as we're looking at it right now. And then for these, I'm going to use a mixture of the southwestern low density housing and the beachfront properties North American. Now this isn't 100% perfect, but this is an excellent starting point. And when we detail, I'm going to adjust some of the lot lines and use landscaping to try to make it feel like these parcels fill in this entire area. But this is a really nice start. Now, before we transition to Sugar Grove, I want to make a couple of changes to the park right here because I think that we were doing some things in the park to try to bring activity to it that we don't have to do anymore. So I'm going to remove each and every one of these park assets in the park. And then I'll reestablish the paths. And I'm honestly not all that concerned about this because I actually just added one of the parks that was in this park right here because I think that that's a better location for it. Now, the way that we're going to bring activity to this park is some of our new piers. Now, that might not seem super obvious or like a super obvious choice, but I think it's going to work really well for us. The only thing is we're going to have Anarchy on because I can't just upgrade this. It'll say elevation too low, but if I have Anarchy on, it will let me do it. So I'm going to basically make this an observation post. And this pier should attract people to the park. So I actually want to add 2 of these to try to have as much activity as possible. So we'll have a lower pier as well. And you know what? I kind of hate this, so I'm going to get rid of it. We've got one up there that's going to be good enough for us. We'll just make another road connection like this to provide lots of mobility and accessibility through the park. And there we go. That should be good for the park. Now, moving over to Sugar Grove, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I was going to extend downtown and just have some of the same assets coming into this neighborhood, but I don't necessarily love that idea. What we're going to do instead is switch over to a different asset set entirely to try to make it feel like a different developer developed this area and to try to make it feel a bit more dense. And for that, I feel like the UK asset pack is the way to go. So we're going to have our low density detached housing near the park. And then as we step towards the coast over here, we'll switch over to our low density semi-detached. Those are our duplexes before having some higher density UK homes right along the coast. And I'm going to make sure that we're really controlling our zoning through here as well. I don't want homes facing, for instance, this street right here. That actually probably should be an alleyway, nothing more. And I went through and disabled zoning in targeted locations, basically trying to maximize density and preserve views where I can. And I think that this looks pretty darn outstanding. Now, initially I was thinking that I would grab some of our mixed use buildings and bring them into this neighborhood, but I decided against that because I feel like these duplexes look like historic mansions that have been divided into smaller units. So you get the increase in density, but the preservation of the historic structures. I did decide to add one apartment structure though, kind of a nod to how things sometimes change and how you'll end up with one building that gets redeveloped because there was a dilapidated mansion or something of that nature. But perhaps there was historic preservation that took place after this was built. Now, before we move on to downtown, I want to move over to Little Nantucket and Glenmore over here. And for Glenmore, there's not a lot that I want to do. Yes, it's repetitive, but honestly, it's the design that we have over here, and you sometimes have neighborhoods like that. So if anything, I'm going to basically mirror what we've done over here and extend it out a bit further and make sure that all the homes are facing in the same direction. And then we've got a teeny tiny elementary school over here. I have been avoiding these, and I'm going to continue to do that. Someday, I would like to be able to use the small elementary schools, but at this point in time, they just fill up so quickly, you can't keep up with demand. We're just going to go with something a little bit bigger. And we'll go with our UK suburban primary school, and I'm going to add the extensions onto this right away. So now, before I resume things, I want to control zoning, because once again, we have zoning on the wrong roads. And now we can finally resume things. Now, I want to extend, it looks like this is the European residential, but there's a path back here, and I don't know why this is here, so I will get rid of that along with some of this arbitrary parking. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing back here, but I'm going to get rid of all of these homes first. And then lastly, I'm going to do the exact same thing down here, just extend the zoning out so that these blocks are complete. There we go. I feel like this now has that early 2024 vibe. We have the exact same assets all over the place. Now, I'm going to try to improve that just a little bit. I'm going to eliminate a couple rows of these homes and see if they come in looking a little bit more varied. And I'll call that marginally better, but probably not worth messing with unless we're going to really change out the land uses. So let's turn our attention to Little Nantucket. And I want to really focus on the area right along the train tracks. This is an area that I struggled with. You might recall that we had a whole bunch of parking back here and it looked kind of crazy. What I always wanted to have was low rent buildings back here. So I'm going to begin with some parking roads because I want to create some parking lots and then place some buildings on the outside of the parking lots. And that's not going to work. That's way too small. I thought I could do a little bit better than that. That's not perfect, but it's okay. So I think we'll go with something like this. So now I'm going to search specifically for rent, and I want to narrow it down to both the China pack and the Eastern Europe pack. And then I want to go for a building level of 1 and a maximum depth of 4. And this narrows it down to just a couple of buildings. And this to me is way too tall. I'm wondering if I shouldn't just go through all of these myself and see if there's any that really jump out to me. Bluntly, I think that all of the Chinese assets are just too tall, so I'm going to go with some of the Eastern European assets for this. I decided to swap out the parking lot for something a bit more simple, and this works a ton better in my opinion. But one thing that we've got to do is kind of tone things down. I just feel like these colors are too vibrant for what you'd expect to see in this part of the world. And I feel like these muted colors work a little bit better. We'll do the exact same thing in these other areas, though I think I might skip the parking. I did that over here, and that's a way of reducing the cost of the units, considering each one of these surface stalls would probably cost about $10,000 each. It's a lot of money, and it gets tacked on to rent. You know, and just thinking about it, I might actually add in one of these taller buildings as a way to offset that. So maybe we'll have one taller building. This isn't reasonably all that tall. I'll place it right here. That's very close to the train tracks, but that happens. Or at least I should say that happened. I don't know if that would fly anymore. And then I'm going to place a couple of these French pack assets as well. And then for the rest, I'll go with the Eastern European low rent housing. Okay, it's the exact same thing that we did over here. We got to mute the colors a little bit, especially the roofs. The roofs are just far too vibrant. And honestly, I kind of like going with this brick vibe all the way through here. It kind of feels like what I'd expect to see. But I've got 2 level 1 buildings right here, and neither of these recolor, so I will ruthlessly just get rid of them. And this is going to sound petty, but I feel like there would be more of a pattern. Right now, it's kind of alternating random buildings. I did that on purpose, but I think it looks bad, so we'll fix that. And then finally, I can't help but think that we need to have some parking here. And one way that the city could help with that would be to add extra street parking. So I'm going to use a custom road because we've got one right here that has additional parking. And if I do something like this, the city's basically provided a whole bunch of parking to the low rent apartments, which I think could happen in a situation like this. Now, for the rest of this area, it's going to be pretty straightforward. Commercial and mixed use along Applegate Street. We're going to have some more townhomes along Crossing Street. And then I really want to mix a variety of single family homes in the rest of Little Nantucket to make it feel like it's older. And then just like I've done in the other commercial districts, I'm going to add parking behind this. Now, for these row homes, I think I'm going to go with some of our newer region pack row homes. And it's looking like we might have to make a couple of modifications. because this is not going to work, and neither is that big tall building over there. And that looks pretty darn good. But before we move on from this area, there's one more thing I want to modify, and that's right here. We've got this big park space, a little tiny park in here. So we'll get rid of that and add something much more prominent. And this is, in my mind, a much better fit for a park in this area. And now we're almost ready for downtown, but we've got a whole bunch of alleyways to remove.
Would you excuse me for a moment?
Serenity now!
Oh my goodness, I'm so thankful for autosave right now. There's only a little bit more to do. I basically want to take this alleyway and convert it to parking and then fix up some of the commercial right here. I decided to go in a different direction here. I added in another street to increase the density here, and reasonably, this would mirror some of the other streets in the downtown area, so I think that this makes a ton of sense. And I think at this point, we're finally ready to take on the downtown area. And there's a couple of things that are going to be guiding my decision making here. Number one, I want to have a really strong mix of uses. So I don't want to just have all commercial or all office. We're going to have a little bit of everything. And we're going to have a little bit of everything on every block. So this whole area is going to feel a lot like Lake Street. Number two, I want to have alleys. So we're going to have alleys on every single block. This is going to be a bit of a nod to the previous design of the city, but I'm hoping that all of these are going to be functional. And then finally, I'm going to add more detail than we've added to some of our other blocks, but I'm not going to go absolutely crazy because we're likely going to be replacing a lot of what we put in this area and probably some of it in short order. So I'll begin by dezoning these areas. And then we're going to focus all of our land uses towards the arterials. So that's where we're going to begin. I'm not sure if you could tell this during the time lapse, but I was really struggling to build this area, and it really comes down to a couple of things. First, this area has a whole bunch of blocks that aren't perfectly square, and because of that, the zoning was incredibly broken, so buildings were spawning in irregularly, and it just didn't look right. But also, because I used the advanced road tools to disable zoning, I wasn't spawning any corner pieces, which made a lot of the blocks look very unnatural. So I decided to take about an hour off camera and make manual adjustments, adding corner pieces and adjusting buildings so that they're situated where they should be within these blocks. And I think that the net result is that all of the blocks look really cohesive and they make a lot more sense. We have things like this where the buildings are all flush with one another, not necessarily the road, but they're still connected and they look really, really good. I've also taken buildings like this one and scooted it over a little bit so that we have a little bit of space right here where we can eventually have a pedestrian connection and where this awning actually makes sense to exist. So lots of small adjustments like that. And I've done that for all 16 blocks of the downtown area that we've covered so far. And then the other big change that I made is with parking. I had a whole bunch of one-way alleyways through here, and I was going to go with that, but as I started seeing people parking back in the alleyways, I thought it looked very, very strange. So I decided to swap these out for bi-directional alleyways, and we're going to use Dome's parking assets when we detail all throughout this area, and then we'll throw in a bunch of surfaces back here, which I think will make this feel much more urban and much more complete. But we're still not quite done with the downtown area, and as I was looking at this area, I couldn't help but think that we probably should change the land uses just a little bit. So I did start to change some of them right here. I have some more auto-oriented uses, a bank, a gas station, a grocery store, things that people could drive to and quickly get in and get out. But over here, I want to transition into uses that were never in this area. So I'm thinking that I want to have a soccer field, a parking ramp. I also want to have some industrial buildings, which is going to be a real big change for this area. Then over here by the high school, I think I want to have mostly residential uses, maybe some commercial uses in these couple of blocks right here. And I want to take Davenport Street and blast this straight through. So that is going to be another significant change. So that's where I think I'm going to begin. I'll begin with the changes up here. We're going to have mostly row homes before we taper into our residential. But again, I want to blast Davenport through first. And the whole reason that I decided to make this change is it felt like this was a whole bunch of wasted space in the downtown area, space that I wasn't sure what to do with the first time around. And I know what I want to do this time. I want to have commercial back here. So I think that we're going to just add a bit of commercial along Main Street, which seems very fitting. And our commercial demand is really low right now, so we're gonna have to revisit this area as things begin to spawn in. Now that's a bit of a shame because I wanna have more commercial right here along Main Street. So I'll zone it in anyway. And maybe we'll mix in a bit of housing as well. Now right here, I'm gonna go with a mixture of medium density housing, commercial, more medium density housing, and then some row homes. And then right here, I think I want to go exclusively with row homes. But I can see that we're situated incorrectly with our zoning. So I'm going to modify this using the advanced road tools. Now, for better or for worse, these are all screwed up. So we'll just need to really pay attention as we're zoning these in and try to situate these as closely as possible to the correct orientation. Now, one thing I don't love is how these zoning cells are shifted. But I'm not sure exactly how I can fix this. I do have an idea though. I'm going to temporarily block the zoning right here and then load this area up with what I actually want on this side. Then I'll just use Move It to select all of these, hold down Alt and rotate these things around. And now it's perfect. And I know you're probably thinking to yourself, how does this look perfect? It's going to be just fine. The cranes have a bug which makes them look insane, but it doesn't do much besides look crazy while it's getting built. So I'm going to do this exact same thing for these other blocks as well. I think that this looks pretty darn good right here. The one thing I'm not a huge fan of though is how big this block is, or at least the space relative to the parking back here. So I'm going to make a minor adjustment. And we don't have any demand at all for commercial, so I decided to switch this out with office, and that should be a good fit right here as well. And not the most building variety right here, but honestly, I think it's just fine. I'll just scoot the buildings so that they're situated in the site just perfectly. And now it's A-okay. So that brings us to our last couple blocks over here. So the first thing I want to place is a soccer field. And I'm guessing that this will fit perfectly either in this block. Oh, that is perfect. Fits like a glove. And I'll bring this to Superior Street height. And then we have to have some sort of a parking facility to serve this. I'd imagine there's minor league soccer or something like that happening here. So we'll add a bit of structured parking, which apparently everyone and their brother loves. Now, right here, I'm going to extend this road straight down. And the goal will be to do more of what we've done over here, mixing the uses and having them basically come all the way until we meet our soccer field. Now up here, I want to have residential uses. So we'll just have row homes all the way along Kent Street right here. Now right here, I'm going to add a bit of parking for the teachers. And ultimately, I decided to take a small mulligan on this idea. You know, I think that it makes much more sense to have the parking right here next to the school. And then across the street, we're opening this up as a parcel that belongs to the school. Maybe the kids could play kickball back here. There's a small playground and a basketball court. So I think that makes a ton more sense. So now I want to switch focus to these parcels right here. And again, these are just going to be a mixed use area. And I decided to take one more sizable mulligan right here. We're going to go with some of our urban promenades buildings, which I think will make this feel like a really modern part of town. And that leaves us with the area right here. We're going to have a bit of industrial. And I'm going to be very prescriptive with these because I want some larger industrial buildings. So we'll go with 6x6s. And it looks like our commercial demand has rebounded, so I'm going to add some more general commercial over here, kind of lining up with what the uses that we already had over in this area. And the whole reason that this is here is to act as a buffer in between some of the residential uses over here and these industrial uses right here. Now, for these couple of factories, first of all, I don't want any smokestacks, so we'll get rid of those. And this building needs metals, and this one right here needs timber. So I'm narrowing this down to storage, and I'm going to start out with the ore, and I want to have a large ore storage, and then it's creating metals. I believe that's just general storage, but we'll worry about that in just a moment. Let's figure out our timber. And I believe that we're looking for something like this. So now all I can think is that this probably should be situated slightly differently. I tried to make it feel like there's some sort of direct train access to each of these facilities, even though I can't actually place a station because they're really, really large. But we've got the storage, the appropriate storage for each of these buildings, which hopefully helps them be very, very efficient. Look at that. The efficiency is through the roof. Now, we also have general storage that we have to contend with. And for these, I'm just looking for some fairly basic warehouses, and I'll place them right here. Those shouldn't pollute very much, and they should be a nice buffer in between the industrial and the neighborhood, along with a bit of commercial, which we'll place right here. And then on the side of this, I'm going to create 2 parking lots. And now, lastly, we just have to clean up these couple of blocks right here that look honestly pretty bad. And with that, there's only one more area to focus on, and that is our city park right here. And for this, I want this to be functional if at all possible. So I'm going to grab a small plaza and try to place this in the center, and then we'll deconstruct the asset a bit. And I decided to go in a slightly different direction with the park. I eliminated that bus-only turn and added a street straight through. And I just think it makes this a much more cohesive park, even if the park space has a bit of a division. And with that, all of our land uses are in place, and I think that this looks fantastic. So let's move on to a bit of roadway and transit cleanup. Now, if you've been watching these indicators all episode, wondering when I'm going to finally take care of them, this is the time. Well, kind of. I want to do some road changes first with trees, and then we'll move on to fixing our transit. So the first thing I want to do is look at all of our main arterials, and I want to have street trees in the center. So I'll add the trees and the grass, but I think we're probably going to go a little bit beyond that. And I want to swap out some of these trees. So lindens are the default, and I think I want to go with a London plane. They're just a little bit bigger, and I will only plant young or mature trees. Now, at this point, I could go as crazy as I want to with the trees, but I think there's only really one road that I want to make sure that I plant trees on, and that's going to be Bluffside Street. And that's mainly because there really is no reason to park on this street. And I realized that wasn't entirely true. We do have a number of homes right here that are fronting the street. So I just removed the parking on one half of the street for a majority of it. And then on some of the side streets right here where there's no homes fronting, I got rid of all of it. And honestly, at some point, I'll probably go through the entire build and remove all of the parking on all of these side streets. But for now, I think I want to move on to fixing the tram. That's going to be the next big project that we have. There's a number of locations where the tram track doesn't connect through. But before we connect this through, I think that we have to reconsider the whole tram route generally. Because right now we have this going up Main Street and then going down Crossing before going up Lake Street, having basically no stops right here, and then turning onto what is now Poplar Street. I think that we could probably have two separate routes right now if we wanted to, and I'm going to do that. So I'll add tracks to the rest of Superior. I'll fix the track right here, and then I'm going to run it all the way up Lake Street. And then our next break isn't up until Poplar Street. We're just missing a small segment right here. Now all of that's working. And then our other broken segment is right here. So I believe we just have to double track this, and now everything is connected. Now, looking at our routes, it looks like our red line right here is doing just fine, but our blue line is still not connected. And that's because we have stops like this one, which are now in places that no longer have roads. So all I gotta do is pull this down, but I wanna do something more dramatic. I want the blue line to basically be the route that goes down Lake Street. So we're gonna have to add new stops and remove some from Main Street. And then I decided to make a modification here that I'm not sure I'm going to roll with or not, but basically I'm going to share all of these stops, and that's going to help me have service that you could transfer between. So now I just want to take this blue line and we'll swing this in at the exact same stops. And now there are a number of waypoints here that I have to remove. And the moment I get rid of all of those, it jumps onto Lake Street, which is great. And it seems like this configuration is a recipe for disaster, but we're gonna have to see what happens. Basically, I think that you shouldn't have to switch sides of the road, but that is what it's gonna make me do. And that also means that you're gonna sometimes have a little bit of backup as the blue line is waiting for the red line to clear and vice versa. But ultimately the tram is completely fixed now, so let's get our bus lines fixed. And for these, we just have a lot of stops on roads that no longer exist. So the first thing I'm gonna do is remove all of these. And at this point, the two routes are operational, but they're not doing things that make sense. For instance, you see that this red route is looping around right here. So what I wanna do is add waypoints so that I can understand what these routes are doing. And I'm just gonna turn off all of the noise. And now I should be able to make simple modifications to the routes. And it's important to remember that the purpose of this red route was to provide coverage over to our shopping center. So I brought this as far away from our trams as possible and provided a route that doesn't really overlap with the trams all that much. So this should be very, very useful. Now this blue line goes to the airport, and this one is all screwed up right about here. And I think honestly, doing something like that is probably all that's needed to make this one legible. But I'll take it a step further, and I'll ensure that both routes, both the route to the airport and from the airport, are getting on the highway over here. And now the last thing I have to do here is add some bus stops. And with that, all of our roads and transit routes are fixed, and the only problems in our community are death, which we'll deal with at some point in the near future. But for now, let's move on to a bit of landscaping and detailing. Now, I think I've got to call a spade a spade. We've basically rebuilt this entire city in this video, so I think that rather than doing a whole bunch of intricate detailing, we're gonna need to zero in on the things that are the most important and consider the detailing of this region, this city, to be a long-term project. So what I'm gonna do is start out from the right-hand side of the screen and work our way to the left. The left downtown and the beaches. We're still going to be doing quite a bit. We're going to be adding Dome's parking lot assets. We're going to be adding some of Sully's beach surfaces to make it feel like the beach is a proper beach. We're going to be adding pads along the coast and adding a whole bunch of riprap. But I don't want to go completely crazy because there's a lot of work that we could be doing in these areas and it would take a lot of time. And I think that the city deserves that level of detail based on all the work that we just did. So I will start all the way over here. We'll go through block by block, adding surfaces, adding landscaping, and just trying to make sure that everything feels as cohesive as possible. I'll likely also be locking targeted buildings because I want the city to maintain a certain vibe if at all possible. So without any further ado, let's get landscaping. After 3.5 hours detailing, I present to you the new and improved Paradise Bay. You know, and I said I wasn't going to go ham detailing today, but I ended up doing a little bit of everything, from the beaches to new riprap walls to every single block downtown, adding parking, landscaping, extending surfaces. There's obviously a ton more that could be done, but I've done quite a lot, and I think that this looks absolutely outstanding. Now, I do want to explain one thing though. I'm sure it's going to be a little bit controversial that I took this entire shore right here, which was a beach before, and eliminated the beach. The main reason for that is this isn't California. This would be a fairly cold place where you wouldn't be able to use that beach all that often. And after looking at other cities that are on Lake Superior, they just don't have any big beaches like that. They have some smaller beaches, but if you think about it, you get to use the beach 3 or 4 months out of the year. So maintaining it at the expense that it would generally have wouldn't be worth it. So having riprap like this, that makes a ton more sense, especially because you'd be protecting the shore from the ice. So there we go. That's why I decided to do that. And after all that detailing, there's only one more thing left to do. Let's take inventory. We'll be done with a brief city tour. My goodness, I hope that city tour showcased just how much this city has changed. And I'm saying that I hope because I haven't recorded it yet, but I'm guessing it's going to be a really mind-blowing city tour. But if that doesn't impress you, I think that these numbers might. The population of the city has grown by 21,000, just about 21 anyway. And we have almost 4,000 new employees in the community. It's because every single neighborhood, with the exception of Quarry Park and River Rock, have grown in population and jobs. Quarry Park has exploded in jobs. I'm not exactly sure why, but River Rock had a slight decline in population. Those are the only neighborhoods that have gotten smaller in any way. All the rest of them have added a ton of new jobs and a ton of new people. And honestly, when you look at the city, it's not all that surprising. It looks a ton bigger, at least in my opinion. Now don't leave just yet. I've got a few more things that I want to show you. Starting with this, Tigon is an absolute wizard and put together some custom tram assets for this build. Thank you, Tigon. You're just seriously amazing. These are not currently available on Paradox Mods just yet, but Tigon is working at it. So let's check this out. We have the Chuckles People Mover. And look at this, it's coming out of its facility right now, and it's a little baby tram with a Chuckles logo on the side. I just love this so much. What does it say? It says, all aboard for fun. Thank you so much, Tigon. This is outstanding. Outstanding. I'm so pumped about this. I know we don't have official custom asset support, but you figured out a way to make something really, really exceptional. But if you think that this is impressive, I can't wait to show you the next thing. We're swinging by our rail yard because Tigon has cooked up something really, really special. A completely custom freight train for Clearwater Southern. And actually, it's a number of them. So to put them into service, I'm grabbing this Magnolia to Duluth line, and I'll switch the train to the Clearwater Southern Blue train. But look at, there are so many different options. And now I just got to speed this along for a little while so we can cycle the old trains out. And after just a couple of minutes, here is our new Clearwater Southern train. This is so cool. It's so cool to have a Clearwater Southern train in the game. Again, this is not yet on Paradox Mods, but it will be soon, and I will let you know when Tigon uploads them. Thank you so much, Tigon. This is so cool, and such a cool way to celebrate episode 50 of Magnolia County by apparently having a route that disappears. Now again, this is episode 50 of Magnolia County, and we've been going at this since late 2023, so I thought it was the perfect time to see how the city has grown. And wow, it is just amazing to look back at the early builds and see just how far we've come in this. We've been working at this since late 2023, and this whole region has really exploded. The whole game has gotten a ton better. We've got new assets, we've got new mods, and I'm just having a lot of fun with the game. But I am really curious to know how you guys feel about me taking a sledgehammer to the build like this. Considering all the new assets and all the new mods, it just felt like it was time to revamp this part of the build, and I'm really pleased with the results. I think that it looks really, really good, and I've had so much fun building today. Now, my editor is acutely aware of how much fun I've had on this build because this is the most footage that I've ever recorded for any video. This is 300 gigabytes of footage, and I don't even know how many hours. So I want to thank my editor directly for all of your work on this video. I know this is a movie. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. He also reminded me that this is the 750th video on the channel, which I think is a really neat accomplishment. Thank you to everyone who's watching this, who's ever watched this, who's been along for the ride. Thank you so much, guys. I also want to give a huge shout out to the channel members, the patrons, and the Twitch subs, because this video, this length of time in between videos, is only possible because of that direct support. It gives me the ability to put more time into videos and really put this extra level of polish and thought into them. And I really appreciate that. But even if you're not supporting in those ways, I want to thank you all so much for your time. Thank you for your views. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your kind words and encouragement. It really is what keeps me going, and it's why I've been making this series now for 50 episodes. But after all of that, I think it's time to leave it here, and I really hope that you've enjoyed this one. If you did, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. And again, I want to thank you so much for your time today. There's a million things you could have been doing. You decided to hang out with me and take a sledgehammer to this build. And for that, I appreciate you and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.